Hey everybody, it's David Art Becker here with BeckerArt, and I'm here today to talk to you about and teach you how to use white paint in your watercolor. I know most people don't want to use white watercolor paper. They've been taught in schools all over America and all over the world probably not to use white with transparent watercolor. And I get to say, if you're using transparent watercolor, yes, white is not a thing to use transparently. But lately I've been using white paint, white watercolor, titanium white watercolor from Holbein, by the way, Holbein. And so I use white Holbein titanium white in my washes. And I'm going to explain to you today why there's a good reason to use white sometimes. And actually, I had gone and saw a show at the Art Institute of John Singer Sargent, and some of that work I saw of his had white in it. So, and his work was very transparent. Now, I'm not sure if he used it as a way to enhance his paintings or if it was just something that he used to get back at some of the white of the paper. I'm not sure. But I'm going to show you how to use it to enhance your painting, not to just when you make a mistake and kind of covering things up. That's what I think the schools didn't want you to use white for. But we're going to be using white to enhance the painting. So let me just get started right here. And so the best reason I have found out for why I should use white is this reason. So when I'm using a color, a dark color, and when I teach, it's all about controlling your pigment in a wet wash to get a wet and a wet surface. So when I'm doing a wash, and I do a wet and a wet wash, and I'm just going to put water down now. Just putting water down, my brush is a little dirty, so we're going to get a little bit of color in there. I'm just putting a wash of water down, right? And so this will be a wet into a wet surface now. And so when I put a dark color, let's say I'm just going to use Prussian blue for instance. If I put Prussian blue onto my palette, when you see it in this corner, it's very, very dark color. But when I mix a lot of water with it and it becomes transparent, it's going to get a lot lighter, right? And so I'm going to just go back through here, and this is a very dark color. This is Prussian blue. And now I'm making it so it's very, very light, right? Because I'm diluting it, and so it's more of a tint of Prussian blue. Let me show you what it looks like when it's really dark. So if I have a lot of pigment, that's how dark it can get, right? So that's Prussian blue, but that's Prussian blue and it's more of a tint. And with my watercolors, I always tell my students to control that watercolor in a wet wash. Now this is wet into wet. This has been wet beforehand. So if I want to take and control this pigment, I need a lot of pigment in this wet wash. So you can see right there I had used a lot of pigment, so it's a soft edge. And so here's a line. Actually, I can make a line in a wet wash. This is very wet. The surface is very wet. And I can make a line. And so how do I make that line control it like that? It's because I'm using a lot of pigment in my brush. And there's a lot of water on there. So I leave away the water in my brush and I put down the color. Now the reason I'm doing this is to show you that the reason I use white is that sometimes I want to control the pigment and this color with a Prussian blue, but I can't do that if I'm using a lot of water and I have just used a little bit of paint, because the reason I get this color of lighter Prussian blue is because there's a lot of water and it's diluted. But I can't take a diluted color and make a line. I see now this is diluted. This is the diluted color with water, and I can't control that because it's water on water, and so I don't have much pigment. I don't have much pigment in a diluted wash where it's very light. So what I do then, I can't control this. See, this is uncontrollable. I cannot control a line like I did with a lot of pigment. And so how do I get this color and still control it? Bingo! Use white. It's just a very simple idea. So now what I do is I take the Prussian blue, and to make it controllable in a wet wash, what I do is I take white and I put it into that dark blue, and I create that color that I want. That was the white of the paper mixes with the blue. And so I take white with Prussian blue, and now in this wet wash, I can get it to control it. See, because it's the same light blue. Well, it's a little bit darker right here, but I just had to mix more white in it. So here, this is the same color then. This is the same color, but I'm controlling an edge. Now let me just show you in a place where you can see it. So here across the dark, see I'm controlling the edge. And so there I have enough white in my brush that I'm now creating that color of light Prussian blue with a lot of things that I can control the edge. If I just use it again, if I use it with too much water and I try to make it without white, I cannot control an edge in like this edge right here. That now is almost the same color as the white on the paper, but to control that line with the Prussian blue, that the light, I have to use white, and then I can control it, and it will still look transparent. It won't have the look of opaque. It won't have the look of opaque watercolor, which is gouache. And I'm not using gouache white to make this happen. I'm just using white watercolor paint. And then that's one of the real good reasons to use white, is to get a dark color and control it in a wet wash. That was one of the reasons. The next reason I use it is to enhance things. And so I love using white sometimes to enhance, like maybe this would like to be clouds, and I want to have some soft edges or beams of light. And with it, while the water's wet, yes, water's always wet, but while I'm doing a wash and the water is on the paint and I want to get a soft wet into wet edge, I can make light rays, I can do like this, and everything becomes a soft edge when you're working wet into wet. And so everything you do is wet into wet in watercolor, except for when you keep the paper dry, like I did here, you're getting a hard edge. So if you're doing, like, say, a shape of an apple, the outer edge of the apple is hard-edged, but inside, that apple will be wet into wet, and that's where you can control the edge and learn how to control that edge. It's very important. In my classes, it's the first thing I teach. You have to learn how to control the edges, and so sometimes to take a dark color and make it light like it would be if you were just using water and a tint of that color, that's when I would use white. Like right here too, let's say I wanted the clouds. Now I try to always use the paper for my white first, but there's times where I cannot use it and it just seems impossible to get, then I just go for the white. And now, like let's say if I want to do some cloud work here, I can just do some clouds. And so it's just a slight manipulation of the light blue, and it will still look like the paper below because this is pure white paint. And so it's white paper, white paint. Now, if your paper is a little bit more the off-white, then you're going to see the difference between that. But usually, the white paper is always going to be the brightest part of the whites that you're going to get. So you always want to try to keep the white. So let's say we're doing clouds, and let me do another wash right here. I'm just going to wet it down, right? So I'm going to wet it, and I'm going to take this light, and so now if I want to go around this white, and let's say I want it with that light blue, I'm going to put a little bit in my brush, the white blue that I started out with, because I can control it because it's a little bit thicker. And so I need thick paint to control around a wash. To get around like clouds and stuff, I can't just use a little bit of this light paint where I can water it down, but when I put water in water, it's just going to blend itself together. So using a little bit of white with this blue again will make me get better edges. I can control the edge in a wet wash better, and it will still look very transparent. It will not be transparent because you are using white, but there's only a couple of societies where you cannot use white, and so for those you can enter those paintings into those. But for the places like TWSA, Transparent Watercolor Society of America, they don't let you use white at all. So don't use it. And I'm not against that. I think that's a great find, to go into, try to get into clubs like that. But just make sure you don't use white in that. Now you can use colors that have white in them, but you have to use them transparently. And what that means is you put down the water, and it's got to look transparent. It's got to be able to see through the image and see the paper almost. So that's what transparent means, right? So you can use a color like pink, which is white and which is red and white. I have it at my palette right here, so there's a pink. So if I put it in a wet wash, it will be very transparent. It's just a color that happens to have white in it, and so, but if you use it like this in this format where you're letting it be very transparent, then it's okay with those societies. So there you can see how I made a cloud right there. And sometimes when I do a cloud with, let's do another one right down here. Let's do a really dark sky. Again, this is Prussian blue. And I'm just going to put a lot of nice darks there. Now the outer edge will be hard edged because that's dry, right? But inside this edge is all manipulated with wet into wet, soft edges. So here I'm just going to put down a nice dark wash. And now watch this. Sometimes it's fun to take white and drip it into it. I'm going to hold this paper up a little bit and watch this. I'm just gonna let these little fingers do their thing. And if you look nice and close, see how nice they start coming out? You get all these beautiful little fingers and such. And so I make sure that there's nothing in my brush, the water's already on the paper, and so I can use pure white and I can create really cool effects. And again, it's an effect that you can make it look. Now this is going to be opaque. This is opaque, so you couldn't enter something like this into the show like TWSA. But this is a great technique to use if you're not submitting and you want to just make a really cool looking effect, a wash effect that watercolor does. And these little fingers and such really look cool. And you can actually color it with your white. So if you want another color in there besides just white, that's fine. And I will be doing another video probably next week or the week before, after I mean, that on black, using black. I mean, our schools have always taught us never to use black or white, and so I'm going to show you in a coming up episode of how to break the rules of watercolor. We're using white now, but we're going to use some black, and so we're going to do that in a little bit, in a couple weeks. So that's all I have to say about watercolor, white watercolor. And again, what I use is the titanium white, and I use watercolor, not gouache, though you can use gouache. Like if you want to use a gouache, that's fine too, because you're going to be watering it down so much, it's going to be like a watercolor, used like a watercolor, because even gouache, you can water it down enough to use it like watercolor. It's the same pigment, just has a lot of white in it, and not even that it has white in it, but some of them colors are just more opaque, and they have something in it that lets it be opaque, so that it doesn't, gives it a little bit more like texture to it, not texture, but smoothness to it, I guess I should say. And so we'll be talking about that one day too, about how to use gouache like watercolor and also like gouache, like it's supposed to be used. so look for that in my YouTube channel, and subscribe to my channel, by the way, so that you're always up with everything I'm doing and everything I'm teaching. And so this week we're doing a painting at our paint along on Thursday nights that's going to include white into the painting. So join me then on Thursday. And this is November, I think November 11th I'll be doing that. And so that's what I have to do about the white. Again, use the white to make your colors lighter if you want to control them. That's the main reason I could say. You can always tell people that's why you use it. Then now you have a reason to use white in your watercolor, so you can control it into wet wash. All right, so we'll see you next time on David R. Becker's BeckerArt paintings, right? All right, we'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.